Welcome back to the Speakeasy podcast. Today's conversation was supposed to pretty exclusively be about disability. My guest today, Rachel Barkley, is part of the Able American program. She also has her own absolutely insane story of becoming disabled almost overnight. I'm not going to get into it. I'm going to let her tell you. But that was where we set off from. And then, as I have a tendency to do, and as God has a tendency to do, it really branched out into a larger conversation about capacity, about value, identity, dignity, suffering, all things that even if you haven't woken up one day with a really crazy medical thing having transpired, we have all encountered. We have all encountered all of those things. And Rachel just talks about her story and about what she's experienced with such joy and without sugarcoating the hard parts of it and being very clear that she suffered and she ran and she struggled, but with the outcome of even if this doesn't go the way that I thought it would, God is still good. And you hear us say that a lot throughout the episode. And so this isn't just about disability. We even get into like some of her policy work and the politics of it. I put my politic hat on for like, I think a whole 10 minutes. But at the end of the day, what the takeaway I think for me from sitting with her is perspective, and that God really does use everything together for the good of those who love him, even if. Rachel, welcome to the Speakeasy.
I'm so glad to be with you, Blake. Thanks for having me on.
We had to reschedule, and this was one of those where I was not, I don't mean this in a guilty way, but I was bummed. There are some interviews, I'm not gonna lie, sometimes I'm like, oh yeah, we'll get there, like we'll get around to it, we'll redo it. But I think you were sick, I believe, and I was like, oh, I was really looking forward to this one. So I was so excited when we were able to reschedule, because you have a really incredible and inspiring story, and you've really taken that and run with it. And those are my favorite kinds of people that take hardship and difficult seasons and allow them to refine them and sanctify them and go, okay, now what? And we were actually chatting about that before we even started recording. So before we jump in, I would love you to just tell the audience a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, well, thank you for that intro. And it's definitely been a one day at a time journey. So I'm Rachel Barkley, and actually, I'm coming up on my 7th year anniversary of when my life radically changed overnight. I had everything going pretty much to plan. I was 30 years old, so just had my birthday. So middle of May, I just was turned 30, had hit. I was one of those like bucket list by 30 and thought that, I had a plan. And so I hit all those things. I was about to have my first child, which was to plan. I had my first little boy, and then 2 weeks after that, I woke up mysteriously paralyzed. And it was just jarring. I'd been really healthy. I'd run a marathon. I'd been an athlete. I'd eaten healthy my whole life. And so it just was out of the blue. And
We have to pause.
yeah.
So you just say wake up paralyzed. Like you wake up in the morning and you can't move.
Yes. And I had my balance had been really poor, and I had been kind of gimpy at the end of my pregnancy, but my
Yeah.
OB just said, this is normal. Every pregnant woman is like
You're
this.
waddling. Yeah. Like
Yeah.
whatever. Okay.
And I mean, I had a bad waddle going on and I felt very unbalanced, but it was my first pregnancy. So I
Right.
truly thought that it could have
When you
just
got your doctor telling you it's normal. So you
totally.
wake up one morning and you
And I
can't
and I had
move.
been kind of every day after I had my son, my balance had been progressively worse. But again, I had gone into my OB and she'd been like, you probably just pinched a nerve during delivery. Walk it off, basically.
Uh-huh.
Go to some
Yeah.
PT, walk it off. And it was definitely, kind of jarring those weeks, but I woke up one morning and I do like I always did, and I asked my husband to bring me the baby to nurse him, and I go to move my leg, and I couldn't even move a toe on my right leg.
Uh,
And it was, yeah, total horror feeling. And we lived in a multi-story row house on Capitol Hill in DC. And I had to figure out, we had to be like, well, what do we do? I'd never been in the hospital. I'd never had a surgery at this point. So we went to the emergency room. They carried me
Yeah.
down the stairs of our row house. And I had this little 2 week old newborn.
Oh my God.
And we go to the emergency room, and I spend what feels like an eternity, but now, like in hindsight, was only about 2 days of just testing my whole body of why on earth is am I paralyzed? Lots of different things ruled out, but they still didn't have an answer. They almost sent me home because they couldn't keep me in the ER just because I was paralyzed.
Yeah.
And no answers. And then finally, they take an MRI of my upper spine and found an 8 centimeter tumor growing inside my spinal cord. So you have your vertebra, and inside your vertebra, you have your spinal cord, which is very, small and delicate,
Yeah.
and it doesn't regenerate. Your spinal cord is what it is. And so I'd had this tumor probably growing for 6 to 8 years, they said.
Wow.
It just got to the point where it pushed on my vertebra enough to cause paralysis and on my nerves. And from there, through lots of prayers and our huge community of support, we found the best surgeon in the world in Baltimore. Went up there and had surgery a few days later, and woke up completely paralyzed from the shoulders down because they had to cut through everything to get the tumor out. Um, and it was, I tell this story often, so I don't think about like how terrible it felt to wake up and have nothing from the shoulders down. I couldn't
Mm-mm.
sit up. And it
Was
was,
that like, did they prepare you for that?
they did say,
Okay.
a good risk. I had the doctor that actually delivered my diagnosis told us to get our affairs in order and gave
Okay.
me a book on dying with dignity. So
Okay.
I was
You
prepared
knew
for,
there were risks. Yeah.
yeah, a wide variety, and that they said I would wake up with some more paralysis, but they didn't know what.
Golly.
And I think, I honestly, God gave me a ton of peace the night before my surgery that I was in the right hands. And I think I felt so at peace that I was shocked by the outcome. I didn't think
Oh yeah.
that paralyzed. So I just
Yeah.
felt, yeah, it was probably the worst day of my life. And then 9 days after that, with postpartum, being paralyzed, surgery, I had blood clots that developed into a pulmonary embolism. And I coded in front of, I had all my friends and family, my baby in our hospital room, probably 12 friends and family members there. And I coded in front of them. And my husband said he thought it was the last time he would see me alive. That was the last look I gave him. Um, and praise God, they resuscitated me. Had I not been in the hands of nurses, I probably would have died.
Hmm.
People who saw my scans later said this was a huge event. If you were at home, you would have died. And miraculously, after stays in the ICU, came out of that and moved on to the rehab journey and the journey to
Yeah.
reclaim my life after that.
So from being paralyzed from the neck down post surgery, had they told you like the hope is with this tumor gone, like you'll regain, like you had hope?
Yes, I had
Yeah.
my surgeon was like the most optimistic man ever, which I'm very
Yeah.
grateful for
Love
because
that.
the surgeon that delivered my diagnosis to me in my community hospital here locally was the opposite. He
Yeah.
was, giving me this is the end of the road speeches. But thankfully, God sent me to the right surgeon who was phenomenal. And he's like, yeah, things will be different, but I think you're gonna take steps again. And I even, I had one baby and I was like, well, is this the end of our family? Like, and will I have other children? He's like, you're gonna have other children. And
Oh,
that does resonate. It's crazy what somebody's beliefs and positive words will do because I hung on to that. I was like, no, this isn't the end because he was so optimistic.
that's what I was thinking the whole time you were talking. I mean, like aside of oh my gosh, and that's crazy, was just that how much power our words have. and
Mm-hmm.
other people what they're speaking into your life and your situation, just that really stark comparison between the two doctors. Get
Yeah.
your affairs in order versus you're going to have more babies.
Yeah.
And I think that I can be a bit of a realist, a pragmatic, if you will, right? Like hope has not always come naturally to me. I have to work at that. But I think we can like find this line specifically as believers of walking in hope, but it not being delusional, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I do think sometimes Christians get a bad rep for like the toxic positivity thing,
Yeah.
right? It's all going to be rainbows and butterflies. And it's like, I haven't seen that Bible verse yet. Like, I've
Yeah.
found a lot about like guarantees that there will be suffering, but take heart, right?
Yeah.
That hope and faith have to be a part of the conversation. And I love like when I'm talking with friends in real life, I'm like, you can borrow some of my hope until
Mm.
you can manufacture your own. Because like
Yeah.
it's so much easier to have hope for somebody else a lot of
Yeah.
the time than it
Yeah.
is for yourself. And that's exactly what your doctor gave you, was like, you can hold some of my hope.
Oh my gosh, yeah. I feel like I mean the value of people sharing their hope with you. I love how you said that. I just, I've been a believer since I was 4 years old, and
Yeah.
I have walked with the Lord, I've felt the Holy Spirit, and all these things. And so, in so many ways, that equipped me for
Oh
going through
yeah.
this really hard season. But, I'm not going to sugarcoat what I was doing in the depths of suffering. I was not reading my Bible every day. I wanted to watch reality TV in the hospital.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I had nothing left. And it just didn't, I was like, I just can't, that's not what I'm bringing myself to do right now. And the value of my friends sending me a note and sending me, I had certain friends who would just send me reams of Bible verses that I didn't answer. I couldn't hold a phone at the time. Um, and I sometimes I didn't answer, but they kept sending them, and I kept reading them, and they fed
Mm-hmm.
me, and they gave me this like dose of hope and of truth, and like I couldn't do that myself in that time, but other people did that for me, and it
Yeah.
really like do that for the people in crisis in your life, you know?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, the hope is that we're doing that for each other, walking through the life is hard, kind of small, mountains and hills that we all have to walk through. And that's the practice, right? That if you're consistently doling out hope and for yourself and for others, that when it does hit the fan, that hope is your go-to, and that is what you can lean into with your people. Because beyond the surgeries, like, okay, we figured out what it is, now we've taken care of what it is, now you're facing a whole, like, it's not over, right?
Yeah.
Because now you've got to learn how to walk and hold things and do all, like, I mean, learn to do all the human things again.
Mm.
Now you need a
And
whole lot of hope.
well, and the hope thing was such, I mean, at that point, still probably up until, I don't know, 5 months out, I had a hard time sitting my own self up in bed.
Yeah.
And so I was completely flat on my back, literally, figuratively. And, if in the hospital setting for 3 months, if I wanted something, I had to wait for a nurse to come in and get it for me. So I had a lot of solitary time lying in my hospital bed. And I just wrestled with this idea of if I never, I wasn't guaranteed the ability to walk again.
Yeah.
It took me a while to get any movement back. It wasn't certain whether it would come back. And I had to wrestle with, okay, how do I have hope even if I don't know the answer? I don't know the outcome.
Yeah.
What does that even look like? And that was really hard of like, well, I know that God hears me and He is good. I don't know if He's going to answer my prayers exactly how I want them answered.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
That even if hope is like on a different level.
Yes.
I shared, I think, on an episode recently that like I've had some health stuff going on, and I had a moment where I I was like, God's gonna heal me. Like that, we're gonna do these things, and I'm gonna like be miraculously healed because I have had miraculous healing in the past from things, and then it didn't happen that way. And that really forced me to look in the eyeballs of, was my hope in God or was it in an outcome?
Yeah. Yeah.
Was my faith in God is good and he has good things for me, even in this? And if the outcome doesn't look the way that I want it to, he's still good? Or was it God's going to heal me because he's good and I asked him to?
Yeah.
And that's hard. I know there's a lot of people listening that are asking God for healing for themselves or for someone they love. And you and I'm sure have been in both of those boats, right? It's because it's a whole different aspect to be pleading with God for healing for somebody that you love
Yeah.
and that you see like hurting and going a direction that you don't know where this is going.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
And I
absolutely.
think that that is one of the biggest grapplings for Christians today, is that even if, is
Mm-hmm.
he still good?
It is a whole, I've started saying in this whole journey of embracing this that I am a disabled person. That disability gives us a whole different lens of how we view the world and the gospel. And now that I've worked, and we can talk, my work life has led me into meeting all sorts of families with all sorts of disabilities and people with all sorts of disabilities. And I've just realized that at some point in our lives, we are going to be disabled. It might be for
Mm,
a short period, or grapple with disability because we have a child or a parent, or a short-term, injury, or we're all going to age, right? And
hmm
be disabled at some point in our aging lives. So nobody in this world is going to come out without grappling with disability in some form or fashion of their bodies. And it has given me a different view of God's goodness is not for us to be these like perfectly fit beings. That's
hmm
not that I don't see that anywhere in the Bible as
Nope.
a promise or any of that. And I always tell this story of in the hospital setting. I was at my lowest of lows. I have this postpartum body on top of my disabled body, and I had to be bathed by nurses every night. So I had to wait for them to come to me. So it's probably like 9, 10 o'clock till they get around to my room. They bathe me. I'm unable to use the bathroom by myself, so they have to do all of that with me. And it's a whole process when you have a spinal cord injury that is very just kind of you have a lot of humility and no
Yeah.
nothing left at that point. And I'm sitting there waiting for the nurse to come back on the toilet. My husband's with me. We have reality TV on, and I'm scrolling through Instagram, and all my friends who've had babies this summer, just like me, are taking their kids to the park, or they're going to the beach, or all these things that I thought was going to be my first summer with my first baby. And I just wanted that so badly. And at this point, our story, we'd been writing this blog, it had reached tens of thousands of people across the globe. And I was like, I brought my husband, I said, Taylor, I don't understand why God doesn't heal me right now. Like, we have been asking, thousands of people have been praying. And if I walked out of this hospital, everyone would see the glory of God in this miraculous
hmm
healing. And he said to me, in a kind, loving way,
Yeah.
that maybe it's, the better story is suffering well. And
Oof.
maybe that's more of a miracle than walking out of here. And that just hit me like a ton of bricks. And then, later on, as I did look into these biblical stories of suffering, it was this journey of just trudging through it.
Yeah.
And certainly there's healing in the Bible. Of course, I believe in healing. But there's a lot of trudging through unresolved suffering too.
Yes. There's just so much suffering, period. And that's
Yeah.
a new covenant and an old covenant guarantee.
Yes.
But gosh, I would imagine that would be no matter how lovingly it is said, that's a hard thing to hear and probably a hard thing to say. Like,
Yes.
I know that's what we want. Of course, like the headlines and the testimonies are, the bright, shiny healings, and that's great. Neither of us are dogging on that
Yeah.
at all. Like that is Jesus. We believe in that. But I've had a lot of people on this show to just talk about suffering well and what happens when God doesn't heal your body in the way that you thought he would, but instead heals your spirit and refines you and sanctifies you and then sends you out into the world to use that story to
Hmm.
impact so many people, because we're all familiar with suffering
Hmm.
on these varying, spectrum levels. So I want to finish your story out because you have really interesting work that you've done. Like there's I told you before we started recording, like we could go so many different directions with this. But so how long? Okay, let's talk about your rehabbing journey a little bit.
Yes. So I spent a month in inpatient. That was at Johns Hopkins and rebounding from that pulmonary embolism. And a month in, it was all right, it's time to move into a rehabilitation hospital. So these are kind of like specialized hospitals for people with traumatic brain injury, spinal cord injury, to be a bridge between kind of your hospital and your
Yeah.
outpatient real life. And so it's still a hospital setting, but it's preparing you with physical therapy, occupational therapy, maybe some, a lighter medical treatments. So my family looked all over kind of the Northeast for a good hospital that would allow my baby to be in my room.
Mm.
So praise God, this was 6 months before COVID, so I could have family in my room. I mean, it would have been so
Oh
vastly
my gosh.
without it. Yeah, I can't even honestly imagine.
And that's a blessing. Like that's
Yeah.
like thank you, Jesus.
Yes, absolutely. So we found a place with a private room. All of my therapists were moms, so they understood what it was like to be a mom. And so I moved to this is a hospital in Philadelphia. And we moved, my whole family unit moves. My mother-in-law's watching my baby at night. My mom's watching my baby during the day in my hospital room while I'm doing these different treatments. I did 5 hours of treatments a day. So physical therapy, occupational therapy, music therapy,
Yeah.
all sorts of different things to get me back. And that was the first time I sat up in a wheelchair. And, they worked on everything from it was really difficult to get socks on to figure out how to roll myself over in bed. I wasn't at sitting up yet, but rolling myself over in bed. All the different side effects of a spinal cord injury. So I had to learn to self-catheterize 6 times a day to use the bathroom. It was, yeah, as miserable as it sounds. Um, and then they taught me how to do mom things. So I still have a somewhat numb right hand. And so it was, all right, how are you going to fix bottles and give your baby a bottle? And let's find a good baby carrier to put on that you can wear in the wheelchair to take your. So I would strap baby Hudson in and we'd go round and round on the hospital floor with him as I was learning that. And yeah, it was a really great team of people that were just equipping me, the best that I could. And every week we would beg insurance to cover one more week so that I could have more. At first it was only, all right, you only get 3 weeks covered in here. This
You're
is,
literally you're paralyzed, and they're like
yes,
3 weeks. You can do
yeah,
it. I
exactly.
can't.
And I was a congressional staffer before this. So my
Right.
job leading up to this, I was working in Congress. So I had the best healthcare plan. I had the congressional healthcare plan. And we kept begging every week for one more week, one more week. And thankfully insurance approved it. And so I stayed about 2.5 months in that setting. And finally it was time. It was like, all right, this place has served us the best we can. It's time to move home. And another huge answer to prayer, our friend who was a contractor was renovating our old house so I could even get inside of it because there were
Yeah.
10 steps up, 10 steps down to get in and out. And there was a point at the end of the stay, you have a caseworker who works with you on what your transition plan out is. And she was like, preparing me of getting me fit in a new wheelchair and how would I get around with driving and all of the different things I would have to get set up as far as equipment goes at home. And my husband was like, she's gonna walk home. She's gonna be walking by the time we leave here. And it had already dawned on me that that wasn't how I was going to be leaving the hospital. And I had to like bring him along of like, I think I'm disabled, Taylor. I think I'm disabled for, maybe the Lord will totally just miraculously heal me, but I think this is the new normal.
Yeah.
And so I did. I came home in a wheelchair, and now 7 years out, I'm still using a wheelchair probably 80% of the day. But I am walking and just slowly, like inch by inch, have
Yeah.
regained muscle. And I walked on the treadmill 20 minutes this morning.
Dang.
Yes, I did. I was almost a half a mile. And
It's awesome.
so I've, come a long way and had other miraculous stories of how I had two more babies. So it has been, I'm just reflecting this morning when I got off the treadmill of, had you told me in the hospital I'd be doing this, I would not have believed you. Like,
Yeah.
here's my baby girl, my third child here, and I'm on the treadmill. That would have felt impossible at the time.
Yeah. Well, and some of that is like self-preservation, right? Kind of like we were talking about,
Yes.
wanting to have reasonable, quote unquote, reasonable expectations,
Yeah.
but then holding on to hope that like God can do whatever he wants to, and I'm going to partner with him in whatever that looks like. And I'm listening to you talk about like walking on the treadmill and like your baby girl and work and all of this kind of stuff. And as someone that has full use of their legs and still struggles sometimes with feeling like I'm not productive enough or I'm not independent enough or I'm not strong enough, I'm like, oh, girl, reality check time. Like, I know that that has to have been, like we've talked a lot about the physical and the spiritual, but then there's this like identity component because I know you were a buster before, like you were getting it done, you were working with like congressmen, like you don't like live in DC and work in Congress and you're like lackadaisical. That's not how anything works. You know what I mean? And
Yeah. Are
so
you call me type A? No.
no, from one type A to another, no, absolutely not. But like that has to have been like it's just like there's layers on layers of this.
Yes. Yeah, I was processing as we were eventually realized. So we move home and we're in this house that's been renovated so that we're living in the basement of this house. And I have this baby who's turning into a toddler and we had no yard. We're in the middle of the city and it's like, we got to move to a one level house out in the suburbs. We can't do city living anymore for accessibility or for my toddler.
Yeah.
And for many reasons. And COVID had just started, all the parks in the city were shut down. And I was like, okay, there are multiple reasons we got to get out of
Yes.
here. So we're going to move to the suburbs, and I'm cleaning out my closet and packing things up. And I had just held on to this little bit of me, like couldn't let go of that. A lot of me, not just a little of me, couldn't let go of that identity of that former self. And I had all of these race shirts from when I'd done my marathons and half marathons, and I just couldn't get rid of those. And I had like these little short dresses that I wore out on my first dates with my husband for when I had legs that would wear high heels.
Mm-hmm.
And I loved that. And I had my old tennis shoes from that time and, old workout clothes and these clothes I'd wear on Capitol Hill in my professional kind of setting post all of it or pre all of this. And it was so hard. It felt like, oh, am I really just closing like the door on who I was then that I worked so hard? I I had poured myself into like this is the type of woman I want to be. I'm going to be an
Yeah.
athlete and I'm going to be a hard worker at work and da da and just realizing that I was totally stripped of all that and
Yeah.
I'm still a soul. I'm still here. I still have value.
And yeah, value. Popping in real quick to remind you about CrowdHealth. I actually had the CEO of CrowdHealth on the show back in January just to talk through the intricacies of the health insurance system and all the ways that it's really working against us and potentially even keeping us sicker. So, with CrowdHealth, you pay a monthly fee, and with that, you get a lot. A team of people that will help negotiate your health bills, vetted doctors in your area, lower cost prescriptions and testing. And then if something big happens, you pay the first $500 and then the crowd steps in and they cover the rest. That is how something like this is meant to work. So if you are on something where you're paying unaffordable premiums month to month, this is a great option. So you can join CrowdHealth to get started for $99 for your first 3 months when you use the code SPEAKEASY when you sign up at joincrowdhealth.com. That is joincrowdhealth.com, code SPEAKEASY. Now remember, CrowdHealth is not insurance, but this is how you can opt out of a broken system.
Yeah, it was the physical manifestation of my clothes from the old me was just the
Yep.
hardest thing to like, oh, that's not who I am anymore.
Right. Well, and that it's so funny because I just wrote a caption for something for like a post and was talking about like that's okay. We don't think that's okay. We think that going slower and maybe like a lower rate of productivity, or I was actually talking about like walking on the treadmill and that like you don't have to walk at 3.5. You can walk at 2.5 and actually be able to like see the words of the book you're reading. It was like the revelation that I just had recently. But
Yeah.
like that our identity, I think specifically in America, and it hits men and women equally, but in different ways, is just that our value is in what we bring to the table. Our
Yeah.
value is in I'll be super honest. My value used to be like not just what I bring to the table. I bought the table, I built the table. This is my table. Like, and anybody that's been listening for any amount of time knows that last year was this huge journey and God stripping that from me in my own way, right? And that's the thing is that he will do that. He
Mm.
will do that. It may not be through something as, medical and extraordinary as your scenario. Mine was a still quiet voice standing in front of the stove and having to face my own disobedience in what he was asking me to do, but he will strip away everything that we have put our value and our identity in until we understand it is him.
Hmm.
I am of value not because I am type A perfectionist and can get 10 things done in the amount of time it takes a lot of people 5
Yeah.
minutes, but because I'm like a child of God.
Yes.
Period. That's the full sentence.
I mean, it still hits. I'm very disabled. I deal with a lot of chronic pain, and I still, to this day, find myself, being like, I gotta do more. I gotta do
Yeah.
more for this holiday or this thing or whatever it is. And yeah, I'd like to say that a dramatic life-altering event totally, strips you of everything. But I read that verses that were just, fragile jars of clay.
Mm,
That's like bring me back to that, Lord. I still have not fully learned my,
mm-hmm.
I'm not saying what happened to me was like a lesson God was teaching me. But
No, but that
it's
he will use it.
yes, yeah,
Yeah. But it is kind of like in a funny way, almost reassuring of like, oh, okay. So this is just like a lifelong journey that we're all going to be on. And even
yeah.
if something big and crazy happens, you're still going to be in process. So you're still going to be being refined in it.
I hate to tell you, it's true.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of comforting too, because dude, you want to like go down the spiral of I'll be a perfectionist about not trying not to be a perfectionist.
Yeah,
I'm like, I'm mad at myself that I'm not easier on myself. I'm like, wait, hold on. What are we doing?
it just never ends.
It
Yeah,
never ends. So you just have to like pull out of the loop. You
yeah.
have to pull out of the loop. And I really think the only way we do that is surrender and like laying it down. And I constantly have to tell myself, like, God is not surprised. He's not surprised that I have this tenacity and that is my lean.
Hmm.
But he wants to meet me in it. Stop trying to like, like grit my teeth and like bear it through it.
Yes. And it's I also love the verse that I keep like coming back to about like meanings of suffering is um perseverance develops
Mm.
character, hope. Maybe I'm mixing that up in my mom brain today. I'm very
No, you're
bad
good. You're
at
you're
telling
you're we
verbatim.
yeah.
But you know what I'm talking about.
Yes.
Perseverance, character, hope, and that hope will not disappoint us
Yes.
in the end, you know, and this development of character, development of hope. I think about like this 7 year journey for me. I look back and I'm really grateful that the Lord, like, yes, there are downsides to this, you know, type A achieving, but the Lord also uses that to grow that character development if that's the way that He made you, right?
Yep.
And this perseverance through hard seasons and learning about your limits and dependence on others and interdependence on others when you pride yourself in being an independent person. These are just like ways that God has developed this character so that my picture of what hope is totally different than it
Oh
used to
yeah.
be. And I do have faith that that's not going to let me down at the end, you know,
Yeah.
and that's the prize, that's the gold.
That's so good. That's really good. I love that. And you're talking about like the interdependence and people. And I know you were really blessed that you had your people that held your arms up, held your husband's arms up.
Mm.
But I know there's also kind of another side of that, like the dignity aspect of disability and that walking into that and not being born into it, stepping into it as an adult. I'm sure that has to have like revealed honestly what how culture views
Mhm.
weakness, dependence, disability, what like to go from being one way to another and kind of having a front row to how outside of your immediate circle
Yes.
people dealt with that.
Oh my gosh, yeah. And when I think about it, it's often hard for me to undo the knots between my motherhood journey started when my disability journey started
Yeah.
because
Oh,
motherhood really throws you into that too. And I think a lot
yes.
of that is not talked about. And, you know, you're expected maybe to be more independent in your
Yes.
mind or culturally when you become a
And
mom.
capable.
Yes, but in
Yeah.
reality, you're more needy than ever
Hmm.
as a new mom. And now, you know, having two more babies, I realize that of like you need your mom or your aunt or whoever it is, your village, you need your husband, you need people like your body's broken down after you give birth, you know, and it's
Yeah.
broken for a while. And so both the motherhood journey and the disability journey taught me this. And yeah, I think so much. I mean, when I got home, I had my husband and my mom literally changing my diapers. I was wearing
Mm.
adult diapers. And so here I was trying to learn how to diaper my son with disabled, you know, quadriplegic hands from a wheelchair. And I had to wait to get out of bed for either my mom or my husband to diaper me.
Yeah.
And um, it's a terrible feeling. It's a terrible feeling. I have family members who've gone through other medical things that in their older age are dealing with incontinence. And I tell them, like, I know with all of my heart how terrible it feels.
Yeah.
There is no worse feeling because you feel like you're back to that infant state
Right.
and there's nothing you can do to control it. You have to have help. And it's in the most like intimate way. Um, and you know, it is just this level now in my life having like that really, I'm not gonna lie, it was a it wasn't a good experience.
Right.
Those, you know,
Right.
it was a terrible feeling to have to expect my husband and my mom to do this for me. But coming out of that, there's this level of, you know, there's nothing that I can ask for that
Mm.
is, you know, undignifying. And this beautiful, like, I think I wouldn't wish this on anyone's marriage, but I mean, there's nothing my husband and I have not been through. And
Right.
so I think now we're coming up on it's actually our 10th anniversary this year.
Oh.
And it's this like, I don't know, bring it. We have like
Yeah,
deposits in the bank
truly.
of all this stuff, and we made it through that. And I think our level of closeness is closer because he was, there's nothing held back, I guess.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, I think on like a smaller level, you do experience that to some degree after you just have a baby,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? Like that it's a much smaller, but you need
Yeah.
a lot of help. And I think I love that the real kind of trend that you see going around where it's like women like showing clips of after they had a baby and it's like who you marry matters.
Yes.
You
Yes.
know that I mean, I've had a couple of surgeries and two babies, and I am married to a man who will not just like wash my hair and brush it and blow dry it, but will also like help me with the not cute, downstairs parts of things. And it
Yeah.
does, I think that can hopefully it can feel like a loss of dignity or it can feel like a gain of intimacy in a weird way
Absolutely.
and a gain of dependence on one another and it kind of strips down like we just naturally have barriers with one another as humans
Hmm.
and those experiences really strip them away and
Hmm.
every time, and even not like physically, every time we have walked through a difficult season, even if there weren't, physical parts of it, we always walk out the other side going, all right, next level. Like we made it
Yeah.
through, and here's what we learned, and here's what we faced. And so I think gosh, like so much of this conversation that we're having is about perspective.
Yeah.
I
Absolutely.
think that for every Rachel Barkley, there's somebody that walked through what you've walked through and chose a different mindset. And we're not here to like judge that or condemn it,
Yeah.
but it's just a like reminder. It's exactly what we were talking about at the beginning of our conversation about the power of our words and the power of our perspective.
Yeah.
Like you are such a joy and you're so encouraging and you're out here like working on behalf of others who
Hmm.
have similar experiences of you. And it's like, I think a lot of people would understand if you just had wanted to like shut yourself off and protect yourself and not do any of this. And instead you're an open book. And I think that's just really
Hmm.
like convicting and encouraging at the same time.
I truly
Um,
like it. It's one little step at a time. And believe me, I have days where I'm like, let's just close up shop here
yeah.
and let's hibernate for a little while.
I think that's
Um,
necessary sometimes.
yeah,
Like we need to rest. We need to
yeah,
shut it down. This is a lot of like exposure and vulnerability and like hard conversations. So that brings us into the able body. I'm sorry, the Able Americans
yeah,
program and all of the work that you do with that, which is actually how we originally got connected. And it was so funny when we started talking. I was like, so I have a whole bunch of stuff I want to talk about. I promise we will talk about your advocacy, but your story is like so incredible outside of your work. But tell us a little bit about that.
yeah. So I had worked in public policy. That was kind of my passion before I became disabled. So I had a decade under my belt, working at the state level and working in Congress, and have always, everyone feels the calling or their niche that the Lord has called them to. And whether that's, your voice like you and reaching women like you do with your podcast or your creative content. I was always a weirdo who felt called to Washington, D.C.
I love it.
In college, I visited and I was like, this is it. These are my people. And I had worked for Congresswoman Kathy McMorris Rogers, who she was the first woman to give birth three times while a sitting congresswoman. So she was an amazing role model as a mom, and she also her first child had Down syndrome, and so I had worked on disability policy before becoming disabled. So I had exposure to a little bit of it from more of a like book learning perspective, right? And after becoming disabled, I took a year off of, just becoming a mom, recovering from this. And I kind of realized that I missed it and I missed the work world. And My work friends rallied around me and showed up for me throughout the hospital time, which was just amazing. And so I still, talked to people about what was going on. And I had started a business right before I had my baby and everything happened to just kind of do stuff on my own more flexibly. And I was like, Lord, it'd be really cool if you brought some work along to me that allows me to just do the stuff I really like, which is
Yeah.
anti-poverty work and disability work. And the Lord brought me some work in this realm, including this Able Americans Project. So the founder of the project has two children with autism and had just dealt with the system, meaning,
Mm.
Medicaid and Social Security and trying to battle the health system to get, stuff for his kids and just seeing how difficult it is. So he started this project and brought me on, and I was so excited to advocate for all of these families, whether it's a physical disability, intellectual developmental disability. How do we make this system work better for them and really protect it for the people it was meant to serve? So our social safety net should serve the vulnerable really well. I think
Yeah.
almost any American can agree on that. I think that's like a
Yes.
99% issue. So how do we focus our scarce resources on the most vulnerable?
Yep.
And that's the crux of this. And then not only focus resources, but make it work well for them. A big part of my realization of how broken the system is when I got out of the hospital, I had that caseworker. She came in and said, "All right, Rachel, I don't know whether you want to work or not work when you get out. But either way, here's what you would have to do to sign up for the different programs." And she drops 5 stacks of paperwork in front of me. And here I am. I can't even hold a pencil. I can't drive. And I'm having to navigate 5 different offices in DC, get public transportation benefits, which I have to call and make an appointment for, and do the online process, and then show up and prove to them I'm really disabled. And then I get my my transportation benefit. And after that, I can start going to all the other offices to interview. And here I am. I have the most support of anyone in a crisis situation. I have
Right.
husband, I have parents, I have tons of friends who are helping us out. And I thought, what about this person next to me in the hospital who hasn't had a visitor the whole 3 months, 2.5 months I've been here?
Yep.
How on earth is he navigating this when he gets home? Um, and I just had this feeling of we've got to do something about this for the people who really need it. And
Mhm.
and that's really this Able Americans project is we're taking on all these really tough policy questions and saying, how do we build a humane system that helps people get better outcomes when you look at their health, when you look at the ability to work and enter the workforce, to get married, all of these things that are
Yeah.
the promise of the American dream for anyone. So that's this exciting work. It's been a joy to meet people around the country who really want to see it change
Yeah.
and have really hard stories too. And it's often heartbreaking to hear, harder stories than my story every single day in this project.
Yeah, there's definitely an emotional weight to that work, I'm sure. Something that you said a couple times I would love to kind of dig deeper in is you said like people who really need it,
Mm,
which can be a little bit of a touchy conversation, but I think it's worth exploring because if we've seen anything in the last decade, I'd say, is some abuse of some systems.
yeah,
And the what's what I'm looking for. The unfortunate outcome of that abuse is landing on people like your doorstep.
hmm,
It is landing in the laps of people who need these systems to work.
yeah,
So what have you seen with that? Because you kind of have this like more behind the scenes view.
yes, yeah. It's a you know, and again, working in this before and then living it,
Yeah,
um, kind of seen all sides of it. And I really think that both the left and the right have not done a good service to making programs work for the vulnerable. So
100%.
on the left, it's, oh, this broken system, this is a tragedy. Let's invest more money in it. So the left says, let's invest more money in it. And then on the right, you say there's often this view of, well, you have all these fraudsters, and
Hmm.
that is important, that are siphoning money out of the system, or people who are on it who shouldn't be on programs and are abusing the system or milking the system if you're a fraudster. So let's like make the system harder to navigate
Right.
and
Right.
more difficult. And so you have these two responses that don't actually solve the problem.
And it's because they're extreme and the truth and reality is always in the middle.
Yes, exactly. I'm like, and I found in this work that somebody on either side of this is going to be mad
Oh
and
yeah.
not like the outcomes, evidence-based solutions. And so that's really kind of where we land is like, let's look at, what are we really trying to achieve here?
Mhm.
And let's repurpose the funds to achieve that goal and
To like
study.
actually help.
Yes, yeah,
Because I think
exactly.
that is a large part of the problem a lot of the time is like, what where is all this money going?
Yes,
What are we doing with it?
yes. Right. Somehow we're spending $880 billion on Medicaid a year, yet we still have 700,000 Americans with disabilities on wait list for
Right.
care. And
Exactly.
so it's the math isn't mathing
Yeah.
somehow.
And I think that the other side, I agree. Like, I think it's both sides because then there's the other side of it where I don't know if you have ever landed on the unfortunate side of like Instagram or TikTok where people are documenting the ways that they are taking advantage of systems. And you're like, we're just like putting this out there, like content,
Yes.
So it's this tug back and forth where like I think both sides have some like legitimacy,
Yeah.
but we're just like biting each other's heads off rather than being like, okay, but how do we actually like make it better?
Yes. And I mean, I'm not going to say it's easy, right?
No,
Because you're dealing with um, really vulnerable people, often really broken situations. And
highly emotional.
yes, and I actually don't believe that government is ever going to fix those problems because
Yeah.
often it's a spiritual problem, it's a community problem. I mean, when you look
Amen.
at like my health outcomes, studies show that if you have a community like I did around me, you're going to recover better.
Yep.
And that's not something that a government program can provide for a person.
Yep.
Um, so I definitely like a social safety net, critically important, right?
Hmm.
Those like material means care, healthcare, caregiving
Yes.
or in a crisis situation, critically important. But there's other things that are just like our society has to value care and caring for people. And that's a whole
Yeah.
other non-governmental question.
Yes, absolutely. Well, and I think where I've really gotten with all of that is a lot of the state of things is because the church kind of resigned their role. I think, the government came in like, we're going to fix it. And the church was like, okay. And like kind of tried to hand it off to them, but it hasn't gone super well. And so I think that's why things like what you're doing are so important of like, the community aspect and the emotional aspect of it. And yes, the policy, we can make this all look better to work this, like know better, do better, right? We can work with those things as well, but it's such a holistic conversation. And I think when we boil it down just to programs, we
Yes.
miss a lot of it.
And that's a big thing is in our programs, there are actually a lot of structural barriers to things that make up what you and I would say is the good life. So
Mm-hmm.
there are barriers to marriage, there are barriers to work, there are barriers to saving for your future.
Mm-hmm.
If you can't do those three things in order to keep your safety net, like this is what it is, it's a safety net for you.
Yeah.
And if your safety net's keeping you from doing those things, then you're stuck in a safety net the rest of your life. That's not a great way to live.
Yeah.
So the big thing we're working on is let's remove those barriers, which if you're wondering, you're thinking, what are those barriers? That sounds silly. It's
Oh,
that
yeah.
if you're on Medicaid or Social Security insurance, you can only save $2,000 as an individual or $3,000 as a married couple. So right there, you have a total disincentive to get married. you often cannot work more than 10 hours a week. You can't save money for the future. And you're talking like, there's a lot of insecurity in my life that I need a cushion for. Like if my wheelchair
Mhm.
breaks and I have to go get a new one, insurance only covers one every 5 years. So I can't just be without a wheelchair for a few years.
Right.
You've got to have changes to your car or to your home or so many different modifications that you just have a lot more insecurity if you live with a disability that you need a cushion around you. And so it's really difficult to get off of the social safety net if you don't have that.
Well, I think that it's also just they've made it really difficult to get out of the safety net, period. Wouldn't you
Yes.
say? Like
Oh, yeah.
that that's it's not even a conspiracy theory. Like that's the biggest thing that looking at the program and knowing people that are trying to work within it, it's like this system is working against you. Like this
Yes.
is making it, which that's a rabbit hole you can go down and go back to like the 70s when all of these programs are being built, and it's like, were they created to incentivize not getting back on your feet and not therefore having independence from the government? But that doesn't mean, again, that we can't do better now.
Yeah.
Like, okay, maybe that these programs have over time kind of grown into these monsters that herd people into a corner and don't let them get out, but like let's advocate to not make that the case and actually make them a safety net, like you were saying, that like safety nets, like you climb out of the net and you keep
Mhm.
going, you get back on the trapeze. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's one of my colleagues. He always says the network of programs have made poverty survivable but not escapable. And
Yeah,
that is the critical pitfall. And for if a lot of people with disabilities, it actually is something that they might need their entire lives, that safety net.
absolutely.
Being on the safety net doesn't mean you should be forced to be not working or not in a
Right.
relationship the rest of your life as well.
Right. Yeah, like there has to be a way that we can bring it back to being just that, being a safety net
That's great.
that allows people to thrive. And I know that's got to be like I know on a policy side, you're dealing with a Goliath, but then
Yeah.
also like just trying to have conversations with people, kind of like we said earlier, this is so emotional and personal and sensitive. I'm sure you've people's gotta have to like, you have to like regulate people with that. And so just like on a curiosity point, just to wrap us up, can you give us like a window into what does that work look like? Like
Yeah,
what are you working on right now towards that?
totally. Gosh, I do think so. There's many aspects to moving the ball forward in policy, and my particular role is bringing all those pieces together. And so one thing is you have to communicate. You have to tell people what the problem is. So that's what we're
Yeah.
doing here. We're telling
Yeah.
people what the problem is. So that's critical. So that's, social media, that's being in the press, that's all of those things. There is building up champions in Congress to one, understand what this
Mm,
problem is, but then work on nitty-gritty solutions because, for every kind of thread you unravel, there comes another one out. And there's unintended consequences of everything you do when it comes to pushing levers and policy. So striking that right balance of, all right, if we incentivize this, then we disincentivize that. And what's the right blend to do with, what asset limit should there be in
yeah.
Medicaid? Or who should get more money for for Medicaid or not, and all of those things. So it's working on that policy solution, which is a lot of what we do,
Yeah.
and then telling the stories. So finding, people who need that caregiving support and telling their story via video and sharing, what to do. And then there's coalition building, which is maybe what you're kind of alluding to is bringing people who might have different solutions on some things or maybe disagree on parts of the pie, but we can all come together on
Yeah.
this thing. And so that's bringing, all the different disability advocacy groups or fiscal advocacy groups or healthcare advocacy groups or rare disease advocacy groups together to try to row in the same direction on a specific thing you want to get done.
Yeah. So you heard cats all day.
Yeah, basically with my children and in work.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Exactly. But I mean, like I said earlier, you just Like you do it with such joy. And I think it's just a stark reminder that, and I know you had your time in your hospital with your reality TV and like you're allowed that, I think like anybody listening understands that. Because we didn't even get into like grieving the first, months and year of your son's life and what you thought motherhood was going to look like. There's just so much
Yeah.
at play. But at the end of the day, like you have made the decision to use what the enemy meant for harm for good. And you've done that shoulder to shoulder with not just, pundits in DC, but also with the Lord. And it's just an encouragement and a conviction moving forward. I think for me, just having gotten to sit down and have this conversation with you.
Well, this is, I mean, it's been nice to process it with you and think about it with you. And yeah, I'm very grateful for every opportunity that the Lord's brought along. And I just, one little toe in front of the other is how this has come about and how I'd encourage anybody, going through something like this.
Yeah, literally and figuratively.
Yeah, exactly.